On Dispatch this week, your layout photos, the question of the week, and a big shout out coming right up. I'm Roy Smith, your dispatcher, and you are watching Dispatch, the weekly variety show for model railroaders. Thanks for joining me. As I said, we have your layout photos, the question of the week, and a big shout out on this edition of Dispatch. But first, as some of you may have noticed, I failed to post a layout video last Saturday morning, and I failed to post this episode of Dispatch on Tuesday night. Well, at the risk of making excuses, I suffer from periodic episodes of peripheral neuropathy, and it has flared up once again. I've spent a lot of time over the past week or so in doctor appointments and various medical exams. I still don't know what causes it, and to make matters worse, the medication I'm taking for it has been leaving me in a daily state of brain fog. So I appreciate your patience. But enough about that. First up on the show, your layout photos. And here are the photos of your layouts that you posted in our Facebook group this week. After the show, go over to the Facebook group and post a photo of your layout there because we want to see what you're doing on your layout. I will put a link to the group down below. You will know you're at the right place when you see this photo at Echo Canyon on my layout. If you posted a photo but didn't see it in this episode, watch for it in Dispatch next week. And now it's time for this week's Question of the Week. To hear some people talk, you might think that model railroading is a hobby for old men. Well, is it really an old man's hobby? To find out, let's take a look at your responses to this week's question. What age bracket do you fall into? Your responses to the question seem to confirm that a majority of you are middle-aged or older. See the big spike that starts in the 45 to 54-year-old age group? Why does this spike occur? Perhaps it's because many of us older guys are retired and have more time to spend on the hobby. Perhaps it's because the kids are long gone, so we finally have space for a layout. Or perhaps it's because many of us who were out of the hobby for so many years have finally come back to it. I'm an example of someone who came back to the hobby after being out of it for many years. In the mid-1980s, when I was still in my late 30s, I built an N-scale layout, but I ended up dismantling it when we moved to a new home. My military career seldom left me in one place for very long. Sadly, I never photographed that layout. Dismantling it led to a hiatus from the hobby which lasted 30 years until 2014, when I suddenly came back to model railroading with a passion like I had never felt before. And now at 73 years old, I can at long last convert my lifetime dreams into reality. So as the chart suggests, a lot of us may be old guys, but I don't think that makes model railroading an old man's hobby. As you can see, younger teenagers show up in significant numbers. One young man who responded to the question said he was only 12. But what happens to our young friends in the hobby after that? Things like girlfriends, marriage, a career, and kids, I suppose. I think that most of us have been interested in model trains all of our lives, even during those years when perhaps we were not actively involved in the hobby. For example, throughout much of my adult life, when I was preoccupied with a career and family, I still thought of myself as a model railroader. Maybe I was just an armchair model railroader, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I still loved model trains. And that was enough to qualify as a model railroader. By the way, this chart again shows your responses to the question, and below that, it shows how YouTube Analytics breaks down viewers of my videos by age group. As you can see, your responses closely match my audience according to YouTube Analytics. Let me say this. I think that model railroading helps keep you young. I mean, who doesn't feel young, again, when running trains? And in the final analysis, it doesn't really matter what age you are. Anyone can be a model railroader regardless of age. So, okay, you young whippersnappers, you don't have to wait until you're an old geezer like me to get started on the layout that you've been thinking about, because this is not an old man's hobby. Now, I would like to thank all of you who responded to this week's question. Remember, when you respond to a question of the week, you are sharing the hobby of model railroading. And sharing the hobby may just be the best part of model railroading. Now, we do have a question for the coming week, and here it is. Is there something you'd like to do on your layout, but you are hesitating to do it? Why are you hesitating? Is it because you feel you lack the time, money, skill, or energy to do it? Is it because you think it might turn out wrong, or it may not live up to your expectations? Is it because you lack the tools and materials to do it? Why are you hesitating? Please post your responses to this question in the comments section down below. I will then share your responses right here on Dispatch next week. Again, here is our question for the coming week. Is there something you'd like to do on your layout, but you are hesitating to do it? Why are you hesitating? And now it's time for a big shout out. And this week's big shout out goes to Lee Weldon and his N-Scale high rail layout. Lee has been an N-Scaler for several decades. The playlists on his channel show how his interest in N-Scale has evolved over the years. The Early Layouts playlist covers videos of his efforts in the 1980s and 90s. The Western Maryland playlist covers a major layout he built between 2000 and 2012, and his latest efforts in the hobby are included in the N-Scale High Rail playlist. Let's go take a look at Lee's current layout in a clip from one of his recent layout updates.
Hello again, High Railers. Welcome to this week's installment of N-Scale High Rail with me, Lee, your host. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the handiwork of Arnold Rapido, one of the earliest manufacturers in N-Scale. They started introducing models in the mid-1960s, and a couple of the ones that you see running here are of that vintage. But the Rapido name goes back to an early German manufacturer in N-Scale, and all of the products that you see, at least the locomotives, on the layout this evening are of that era and that manufacturer. You've got to love that turbo whine you get from those cup gears. This is the Arnold Rapido Pacific, a 462 steam locomotive. And like its diesel counterparts, the boiler shell is cast metal, which makes it an outstanding performer in terms of tractive effort. Let's let those brass gears do the talking.
Now I hope you will go over and take a look at the rest of Lee's videos. If you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe. I will put a link to his channel down below. Lee, thanks for sharing your layout with the rest of us. Now then, I want to remind you that there are tons of videos for you to watch right here on this channel. I will put a link to my videos page down below. You can go to it and browse around. Or you can watch 2 of the videos just by clicking on them over here. Well, thank you for letting me share the world's greatest hobby with you here on Dispatch. I'm Roy Smith. Until next time, happy railroading.